So much stillness. So, how would we want to proceed? Is there a need for translation or is it okay? Everyone understands English. What came to me was to read a couple of passages from this essay titled The Superman. And then we can have question answers or whatever way it goes. We'll read Savitri maybe towards the end. So why I feel this essay is very relevant and it will stay contemporary for quite some time. First, it puts the idea of the gods in a very correct perspective, and more importantly, it reveals to us the lines of human advance and human evolution which humanity is going to take, the possible dangers and the care and caution we must observe. If we really look at the story of gods and the titans, I don't know whether, I'm sure it's there in every mystic literature, but I have kind of grown up with these stories because there are so many in the Indian literature, and they've been very helpful in understanding what is the higher consciousness and how exactly human beings can advance towards it, what are the dangers and the risks involved. Which much later, when I read letters of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, it was so clear that yes, that's how it is. For example, the classic story of Ravana, that he is advancing along a certain line and he becomes even an instrument of the higher consciousness. Very few people know that he is the person who is credited with making the Vedas popular in a certain age. He was that good, he had studied the Vedas and had made it popular all over. He was very good in music and art and was a bhakta to the core. Yet, there could be a precipitous downfall if you have allowed the seed of ego and ambition to grow quietly, silently somewhere inside. Sri Aurobindo cautions this in the synthesis, and that also when I had read it had stuck to me, that there comes a stage, he speaks of it in the last part of the synthesis, Yoga of Integral Self-Perfection, that as we advance, there comes a stage when we are used by God as an instrument. But then he says that that point, if the sadhak begins to feel it's he, then the whole thing can be transferred on to becoming an instrument of the adversary of the titans. So it was such a word of caution, and then the mother speaks of the need for humility, sincerity and vigilance. So all these things beautifully expressed in this book, The Superman. And here first Sri Aurobindo gives the idea of who this, the word Superman, how did it come into being. So it came into being even before Sri Aurobindo had spoken about it. There are other people who had spoken about it, particularly Nietzsche, and his idea of a Superman was human being aggrandized in capacities. So somebody with a greater mental capacity. Even now we have this illusion, somebody who has read a lot is regarded as a jnani. Yesterday somebody was asking me, what is Gyan Yoga? Is it about reading books? I said, not at all. It has nothing to do with reading books. Gyan Yoga is about discovering the one behind multiplicity. So you pick up any book, or you pick up an idea, let's say the one in all, and you meditate and dwell upon the idea. A time comes when you go beyond the string of words by the power of your concentration, and one in all reveals itself to us. That's an experience. Now when we stabilize that experience, it becomes a realization. Such a person who has realized is a Gyan Yogi, even if he has not read a single book. So this was, various lines of advance. So the word Superman is not about increased mental capacity. It's not about increased higher intellectuality. It's not about increased vital powers. A lot of people have siddhis of various kinds. Now we see so many gurus in the market who thrive on these powers. It's not even about physical capabilities. The other day I saw a video where a man is shown, his name is Snowman. I don't know, is he from Russia? No, okay. He's a snowman. He's called Snowman, yeah. Iceman. He can live in sub-zero temperatures for a long time, almost bare chest. And now these, okay, they show a possibility of human nature, but that's not what Superman is about. Superman is about something new, something which man does not have. And the presence of that fundamental quality begins to change his humanity. That's what in the true sense the gods are supposed to represent. Later gods became aggrandized humanity, but in the origin the gods were beings who had this something extra which human beings don't have, and that quality changes them. So he reveals that, and then he begins to give us a deeper understanding. Especially in his concept of the Superman, he never cleared his mind of a preliminary confusion. So it's a preliminary confusion. Who didn't clear the mind? Nietzsche. For if a sort of human godhead is the goal to which the race must advance, the first difficulty is that we have to decide to which of two very different types of divinity the idea in us should owe allegiance. So there are two different types of divinity. So he's using, because everything essentially, ultimately, if you can say there is the one behind it. For the deity within, the words are so beautiful. For the deity within may confront us either with the clear, joyous and radiant countenance of the God. So one is that we can confront God as the beneficent Shiva, or the ever-smiling Krishna, or the benevolent Sri Aurobindo, the mother, or the ever-forgiving and compassionate Christ. These are the godlike forms of deity. Or the stern, convulsed visage of the Titan. Now some of these Titans are very stern. In fact, they can be very religious. Sri Aurobindo's letter. Some asuras can be very religious. They will go religiously to the temple, church, or the mosque, and they are very titanic. But basically, regardless of what they are doing, their cult is power. And they don't worship God who is powerless. They are drawn to power. That's why many of these beings are drawn towards Shiva in the Indian literature. Because Shiva is mighty. So they want that power. They are drawn towards power. So even in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, supramental being, I will become a Superman. This is a typical way of the Titans turning towards this yoga, that I will become a Superman, I will embody these powers, whether this or that kind, and therefore I will become like somebody who is regarded as a superior being. Nietzsche hymned the Olympian, but presented him with the aspect of the Asura. His hostile preoccupation with the Christ idea of the crucified God and its consequences was perhaps responsible for this distortion, as much as his subjection to the imperfect ideas of the Greeks. So he didn't like the idea of the divine sacrificing himself for humanity. He ended up believing that by doing that, you actually encourage evil. Whereas when Mother was asked what is the cure of evil, she said, it's to substitute within yourself the very opposite. So there is hatred substituted with love. If there is anger, substituted with compassion. So this is the path. But very often we don't do that. We think, yes, it's justified anger, righteous wrath. That is the path of the Titans. He presents to us a Superman who fiercely and arrogantly repels the burden of sorrow and service. Not one who arises victorious over mortality and suffering. His ascension vibrant with the triumph song of a liberated humanity. Whereas the true Superman identifies himself with all the creatures. A very nice phrase in the Gita, which I personally love, the sign of a liberated human being. How do you know he is a liberated human being? So there are many markers, but one of the words is Sarva Bhuta Hite Rata. He is ever engaged in the good of the peoples. He is not bothered about his own personal good and what advantage, benefit, sitting in meditation, aggrandizing himself, Gurudam or any of that kind. He is ever engaged in the good of all creatures. Sarva Bhuta Hite Rata. To lose the link of nature's moral evolution is a capital fault in the apostle of supermanhood. God and Titan, Deva and Asura are indeed close kin in their differences. They can be easily confused. Human beings are likely to mistake an aggrandized humanity for being a superman. There can be no further danger, and surprising, I have seen people who are still attracted towards things which will represent power or some capacity, some supernatural thing, and they think this is the representative of divinity. Nor could either have been spared in the evolution. In the evolution both come. Yet do they inhabit opposite poles of a common existence and common nature. This is Sri Aurobindo's beauty. He will end up with oneness. So it is a common existence, common nature, but they are on two poles. The one descends from the light and the infinity, satisfied to the play. So gods are like playful. They have descended from the one infinite and they are playing in this world. That's how beautiful this is. Satisfied to the play. The other ascends from the obscurity and the vagueness, angry to the struggle. He wants to change things forcibly, fast, without taking cognizance of the steps which are needed in evolution. This is a very nice story. As a adolescent, I had heard about two masters, one master and the other who would be a master one day, but he is a disciple and he tries many things, gets a lot of siddhis, but he does not realize the divine. So one day he goes to a great master who is sitting under a tree and his eyes are closed, possibly meditating. And this young disciple, he has got many siddhis, but there is something missing. He has to learn from this great master. So he sits and he looks at the tree, and the tree is bereft of leaves, and by his powers he makes the leaves, the tree again green with leaves. So the master suddenly opens his eyes, looks up, and again the tree becomes barren. So he thinks what has happened. So he once again by his powers makes the tree green. Once again the master lifts his eyes and it becomes barren again. So this happens thrice, then he remains quiet. Then when the master opens his eyes, he says, yes. He says, I have come to learn from you. He says, you cannot learn from me. Why? You have the arrogance of somebody who knows. You are interfering in the play of God. You think God could not have made this tree full? He is not doing it. There is a purpose in it. And you have interfered in the play. You don't have sufficient humility at this point to learn from me. So he has to go back another 10 years, prepare himself with humility, and then comes back and he ultimately becomes a guru. That's a different story. So the one is satisfied to the play, the other is revolting. Now it has its place, but we should not mistake it for the line of supermanhood. All the acts of the God derive from the universal and tend to the universal. They are not based on selfish considerations, on personal considerations. So God will not punish you if you didn't pray to Him. That's a very selfish way of looking at it. They derive, mother goes on to this extent. Somebody asked her, she tells, there is a story in my memory which I distinctly remember. Now this story I have read nowhere, but it comes close to something in one of the Indian mythologies, which mother had not read, I think so, but this is a story which she says I remember, which means something she had lived. This is the story of the first Asura who wanted to be even as the God, almighty even as the God. So the disciple asked, so what did God do? He said, okay, fine, you try. What do you mean? He said, either ways, if he surpasses himself, becomes like him, he will lose he has to lose, there is no other way. And if he fights to become greater than him, he'll again lose his ego and this thing. So he says, okay, you take the challenge, you try. So it's the way, it's from the universal. He doesn't say, how dare you do this to me and challenge me, I am going to send you rot in some hell where you will suffer. He says, no, you try. I am happy to take this embrace of the wrestler. He was born of a victorious harmony. His qualities join pure and gracious hands and link themselves together naturally and with delight, as in the pastoral round of Vrindavan. Divine Krishna dominating and holding together its perfect circles. Typical example is like people ask in the ashram context, I am sure it's everywhere, in Auroville, in Russia, groups and all. So what is the way of creating harmony? So there is only one way. Be centered around the mother. If you lose that center, then it's gone. Keep the center right. And if you lose that center, then you are no more holding the common hand. So he gives that example of Vrindavan, where all the gopis, who may be personally jealous, oh, this is closer to Krishna, etc., etc., but still it is with reference to Krishna. And as long as things are centered around here, everything is fine. To evolve in the sense of the God is to grow in intuition, in light, in joy, in love, in happy mastery, which is very different from the Asura's mastery, which is ascetic mastery. And as Asura masters by an ascetic control, but it is a happy mastery. That's why when Mother was asked that why is there not much talk about renunciation in integral yoga, she says, no, I don't believe in this. Because as long as you think you have to renounce, you are not yet ready. As if you are struggling to leave something. You don't have to, because where you are going and what you are receiving is so much more greater. It's the love of God that must move us. And when things drop away, we should not even think, oh, I have renounced something. It's so silly. So it is to evolve through happy mastery. And now comes a master line, to serve by rule and to rule by service. Not like the Titans who crush people. They rule by service. They are in the forefront of service. And to serve by rule. There are some very interesting examples, by the way, within the ashram context of some of these administrative heads. Duman Bhai, I still remember, he was one of the trustees. You can't imagine what he could be so simple. If you didn't know he is a trustee, you would never know that he is a trustee. He would be wearing the same dress, his dhoti and banyan, fatwa of the ashram, and all the time his concern was service. On darshan days, he was not like, I will be the first in queue or I will give cards, nothing of that kind. When he is a little bit free, he will just run up, have the darshan and come back, because he is focused on service. That was his approach, no ostentatiousness. Nowadays, sometimes we see, not many places, oh, so and so is in that committee, this committee, none of those kind. Several times he just caught me by the hand, even taken me to Gloria. I didn't know he is a trustee. I just knew he is fond of me, and later on that I share my birthday, and he would send me a card, and I would send him a card, because I didn't have a concept of what is a trustee. I never asked this question, because for me it was mother running the ashram, and nobody told me that he is a trustee. So I went with him, we chatted, and he would send me a card, and when I would send, he would say, thank you so much, with what humility. Later on I came to know he was a trustee. It's actually after he passed away, because by then I was coming a little more often, and then somehow I came to know a few things, and oh, he was a trustee, is it? Never made it appear. So this line is so beautiful. To serve by rule and to rule by service. To be able to be bold and swift and even violent without hurt or wickedness. When the gods, sometimes they are very swift, but they never have wickedness in the heart. So we have to evolve along those lines. With compassion and mild and kindly and even self-indulgent, without laxity or vice or weakness. I tell you, when I read this, it reminds me of the description of Krishna as a child. Mild, even self-indulgent. You are indulging yourself, let's say, to an ice cream. But it's not like a weakness that, if you don't get, you are restless. That sense we have to evolve. Not as a vice. To make a bright and happy whole in oneself and by sympathy with mankind and all creatures. And in the end, it is to evolve a large impersonal personality and to heighten sympathy into constant experience of world oneness. for such are the gods. And then he describes, it is to take all qualities, energies, joys, sorrows, thoughts, knowledge, hopes, aims of the world around us into ourselves and return them enriched and transmuted in a sublime commerce and exploitation. So this is the way of yoga he has revealed. When we give something to the mother, this is how ashram grew. Very often people, there is this Vedic yoga, she revealed in a very practical way. Somebody wanted to start a business. So he'll ask the mother, mother, can I start a business? Okay, start, sanction. And she would give blessings. Marbling section, many others, departments have physical education. So what is it? It's a transaction between us and the divine. All aims. She took all aims of humanity into herself and she became its leader, somebody who was presiding over it. She would go to the department, get involved, engage with it, and she would even give suggestions, and that's how they grew. All the aims, if you really look at the ashram, it grew like that. She was not saying, no, this is your own personal thing, you only do meditation. You want to start business? All right, she gave the name Honesty Stores. Honest business. You want to play and do sports and physical education? All right. You start a department of physical education, and it started with 2 dumbbells which someone got for the sadhiks. You want to, children are just wasting time here and there running about, okay, you start a school. So all aims of humanity, nothing was excluded. She took into herself and enriched it, returned it back. She did not negate anything, she did not invalidate anything. In a sublime commerce, such an empire asks for no vulgar ostentation or golden trappings. The gods work oftenest veiled by light or by the storm drift. They do not disdain to live among men even in the garb of the herdsman or the artisan. They will become the most common of the commonest, ordinary of the ordinary. They will not like, these are people who are not of my stature. I have seen great sadhaks. Oh, I don't want to touch this person. Vibrations are not good. It is going to corrupt me or whatever, defile me or infect me. So once I couldn't resist and I asked a question. I have this weird, sometimes with a bit of sense of humor, of course. So I said, oh, so that means his vibrations are stronger than your vibrations of inner purity. I said, I always knew the other way around, because sometimes jokingly, as a doctor, I was shaking hand, the person said, no doctor, I have a flu, I am not well. I said, you mean you can transmit this illness? So the person said, yes. I said, maybe I'll transmit my health to you. Why not the other way? What is this shrinking, this fear and this all the time? Even health and goodwill are contagious, and I have read they are far more contagious. So, this idea of shrinking and this, many people get caught into vibration, I can't meet, be very careful, it's not going in some right direction. So gods are very different. Why Sri Aurobindo was not meeting freely, people often ask. Because he said, I'll be eaten up. And mother was there. Take the example, as a Shakti, all the time she was playing, she was going to people's, she has visited so many homes, sat there on some specific days, which by the way includes Desiree home, where also she has come 3-4 times. She would go freely, sit, people would offer something to eat, she would go to factories. So this is how the gods are. They do not shrink from the cross and the crown of thorns, either in their inner evolution or their outward fortunes. Maybe people will misunderstand you. It's okay. When has man understood the divine? Sri Aurobindo's aphorism. When has man understood the divine? For they know that the ego must be crucified, and how shall men consent to this if God and the gods have not shown them the way? One of the images that I have in mind very concretely of Sri Aurobindo's own life, it has been described and we have all read it, but what hit me was that Sri Aurobindo, when he was taken to Alipur jail, had realized Nirvana, had some beautiful experiences. Imagine how the police took him. Now imagine this scene, that he was tied to the waist by a rope. Yes. And there was a policeman holding him and carrying him, huddled together with a group of people in a single cell. Sri Aurobindo could have easily come out of it by his sheer impress them by his English language, which eventually some of them got impressed. Oh, you speak such a good English. You can't be, doing anything bad, because they think of English, no? That's how his thing also got signed to come to French India, because of his English. He describes, and all this Sri Aurobindo describes with a touch of humor. When you read his prison life, he is not revolted, he is not angry, and he is, look at, these Britishers, what they did to me. He describes the tales of prison life with so much humor in it that it's a classic piece to be read just for the sheer joy. To give one example, every day they were served a dish called lufsi, which is basically kind of khichdi. Now, Sri Aurobindo says that it taught me about Brahman. So there were three kinds of lufsi. One was white, so it taught him about impersonal Brahman. There was nothing in it. Other was green, so yellow. So this was another aspect of Brahman. Brahman in his manifold aspects. And another kind where you have to actually search where is the khichdi. It's mostly water. So he says transcendent Brahman. It's amazing. He talks about all this so lightly, but is it easy to live for months on one single type of dish? And I think that is why in the ashram one of the things that we learn first is food in the dining room, and all this is just to teach us, to live in that samam Brahman. Of course, this is nectar and celestial. To take all that is essential in the human being and uplift it to its most absolute term, so that it may become an element of light, joy, power for oneself and others. This is divinity. So I think it's a long passage. I'll stop here because I just wanted to read it. Just felt inspired and felt it's appropriate because this year of Superman, we may end up seeing many Supermen, but we should know which way Supermanhood goes. It's to evolve in the sense of the gods. So this passage I'll stop here. Those who want, this is accessible, the full essay in Sri Aurobindo's works. It's an amazing essay. And now we can have some questions if you want, before we can later on close with Savitri, but if there are some questions.